few weeks after I had been in Vietnam, we ended up in this little settlement, several thatched huts, and they always knew we were coming. There's no way they didn't know we were coming. And I've read books later on where this girl's talking about we always had guards and people watching to see when soldiers were coming because they'd hear the helicopters in the distance sit down or something, and so they had their system. And if they were Viet Cong there, of course, they'd go into the jungle. So we ended up these thatched huts and come up to the door on this one small one-room hut. The palm leaves make the roof. It's kind of like shingles laid a certain way. It just lets the rain run off. There's this old man. We never saw young men, young women, nothing but old ladies and older men, old men. And once in a great while, you would see a woman in 40s. And so this old man is sitting at a table. He knows we're there, and he knew we were coming. So he's sitting there waiting. And he has a little pitcher of water, of what I thought was water on the table, and a couple of little glasses. It was tea. He points at the tea, and he makes a motion to drink, and he pours some in this little glass and holds the glass towards me. I'm standing at the door, looking around the room to see if there was anything out of the ordinary. Who knows, under one of these rugs or something, there was probably a tunnel that went underground or something, but I wasn't about to go into that room by myself. And so the old man offered me the tea. He had a very long white handlebar mustache coming down. He had a big smile, big brown eyes, and I shook my head no for the tea he was offering, and I pointed at it, and I pointed at him, and I pointed, "You drink it." Of course, I had my M16 on a strap on my shoulder, and the barrel pointed right at him, my finger on the trigger. And he drank the tea, and he poured some more and offered it to me again. And I said, no. And I turned around, and I walked away. And as I was walking away, I thought, oh my goodness, what has happened to me? How can I go to this man's door? He offers me tea. I have a gun in my hand, pointing it at him. If he makes a crazy move, I would have shot him. And I made him drink his own tea he was offering me. But sometimes, of course, they offered you poison tea, so you just, that's why I made him drink it. And then I thought about those two guys in Louisiana who were teaching us that map course. They had been hardened by war. And so I, too, had now become that way. And what it was some sort of inner shields you put up for survival of sanity, because of going out there and doing that on a daily basis and coming out of some crazy situations. You couldn't survive. You'd go crazy if you didn't put up these shields for your emotional stability of some sort. That's why so many of us came back in a crazy way. And after about 3 weeks or so when I was there, a platoon sergeant came up and asked me if I would walk point. And of course, everyone thinks if you walk point, you're crazy. But I had done a couple of things, and so they thought, and I missed the booby trap, so I found a booby trap, and I was very happy to walk point. I would much rather be walking point than being in the line behind me somewhere. There was about 10 of us when we had a full squad, and there was about 40 of us in our platoon. And so, because I guess I was used to being out in the woods, I was used to finding things, animals in the shadows, and so I was comfortable in that place, walking out there in front, because I trusted myself more so than any of my fellow soldiers. So why would I depend on them if I think I can find and spot things better than they can? Ego. I got there mid-November, and so on January the 7th, that evening, We went to bed. We'd always come back muddy, dirty, or whatever, and take our shower. You know, you put water in this canvas little sack with a little spout on it. So we'd take our shower, eat our dinner, and our weapon was always with us. Anywhere we went, it went. And it lay alongside us. And there's some other crazy situations out there in the jungle, but there are too many to talk about. So, but the last evening I was there with my platoon, in the middle of the night, we had these big guns. I don't know, I think there were 105 howitzers or something. Huge shells they shot. The shells would be stacked up there. And one time we got in a difficult situation out there. We called for fire, and you could hear these big shells flying overhead, whistling, and then they hit over where we had called them into, and because we were getting mortared, and so mortar shells were coming in on us. These guns were always going off, and somehow you learned how to sleep through them because they were right below our barracks. So it's 3 in the morning or so. Man comes through and wakes us up, and he said, "Wake up, we're getting shelled. Mortar shells are coming in." I laid there and I could hear the different sound of the mortar shells that hit and exploded, and of course our big guns were going off. They're trying to figure out the range of these shells and where they were coming from. And he said, "If they get any closer, get behind the sandbank wall." And the sandbank wall about 10 yards from where I was at, outside the barracks. And I thought to myself, if it's going to get me here, it's going to get me there. I rolled over and I went back to sleep. So the next morning, got up and went to breakfast and went and got in our choppers. And this is the first time that newsmen were with us. There were a couple of newsmen, 2 or 3, and a priest. They were from one of the main networks. I always think it was ABC, but I don't know. They got in a different chopper. I got in a chopper with my squad. And so we sat down 3 times and didn't find anything. In one place, I found these casings like the shell could have been carried in. It was the palm leaves that were shaped to hold something like a shell, a mortar shell. So then there were 4 choppers, and there were about 40 of us, and I sat down the 4th time, and of course at this point I was walking point, and so I was going to go to get in with my chopper, but a couple of the newsmen had got in with my chopper, with my squad. They were in the first chopper. I went running back, and the cameraman and the priests were in the next chopper, so I went to the 3rd chopper and hopped in with those guys. The minute I hopped in, pretty much after that, we took off, and so then they flew us off to this place, and we landed in this open rice field. It was a massive rice field. The jungle's like a T up there, and a leg of it coming down here, and the rice field came down on either side of this leg of the T. The rice stubble was only a few inches. So when the choppers land, everyone gets out and fans out and kind of in squatting position because you just don't know what's coming at any time. And so the minute we all jump out, fan out, the choppers take off. Now I'm in the 3rd chopper. But the minute we get out, Morgan, the squad sergeant from one of the other squads, he sees something in the far right-hand corner, way over there on that end of the T of the jungle. And immediately from his stance, I could tell that he saw something. Something was going to happen. And everyone else, his men started following him. They were about, several yards in a single file behind each other going that way. And then the next squad went, and they were about 20 yards behind him. And the next squad went, and they were about 10 yards in front of the other one, so that Morgan was up there, the next squad was here, and this other squad was up here. But for some crazy reason, which probably saved my life, my squad just stood up there after the choppers took off, waiting for me to come get them. So I started going towards them. When I got halfway to them, then they came towards me. I turned around and started going around. But we knew something was in the air, and we were just walking towards the jungle slowly ahead of us in the open rice field. And Morgan got 5 feet or so from the jungle and on that far side. I had just come around the tip of the jungle. All of a sudden, there were all these automatic weapons fire that came out. I looked across, and I saw Morgan and Black just crumble. They didn't hit the dirt, they just crumbled. And everyone else just hit the dirt. In a split second, we were all on the ground. And the minute everyone was on the ground, all these shots stopped. And a split second, silence, insane silence after something like that, a massive flurry of gunfire. And I jumped up and I ran straight ahead to the jungle where they were at and to the open rice field. And then I heard that first shot coming and I hit the dirt. There's a flurry of gunfire. From my peripheral vision, because I was way back here, I had just come around the corner. No one was moving, no one was doing anything. So after I heard that first round of shots at me, I hit the dirt and I lay there for a second. The shots stopped. I jumped up and I charged him again. And here came the gunfire and I hit the dirt. And it stopped. And I jumped up and I charged him again. That was about 20 yards from the jungle. And there was a dike along my left side that keeps the water in the rice field. There's jungle on that side. I knew if I jumped up one more time and charged them, I was getting too close and they were going to get me. So I jumped up and flew over the dike and went crawling up another 10 yards. And at that point, I guess these two men in my squad saw what I was doing, and so they did it. And they were starting to get shot at. So I shot at the Viet Cong right in front of me. I could hear them moving now in the jungle. And when they stopped shooting, these two guys were really crawling real fast. And they got right up to the edge of the jungle because I had been shooting in there and keeping them from getting shot at. One of them was Stewart, and the other one was Young. And Stewart I always thought was a little crazy because of the things he did, which didn't make sense to me. And Morgan and Black were at the far end of that jungle, and they were dead. And Stewart stands up, and he faces them, and he's kind of crouched. Why on earth he stood up didn't make sense to me. But the minute he stood up, here came this massive flurry of gunfire, and he went down. And I shot in through there again, and then I could hear them moving, and Stewart said, "I'm hit." And then he was quiet, and the gunfire stopped, of course. I quit shooting, and when I quit shooting, Young stood up. He was blue-eyed, very pale, fair-skinned, had a radio on his back. And he stood up, and he was going to go towards Stewart. But of course, the minute he stood up, they were only about 5 yards from them. He went down, and he never made a sound. He just went down. I shot through there again. They quit shooting. So I crawled up another few yards and heard them moving, shot in there again where they're moving. And this one young man I'd come with came crawling up, and I told him, "Stay right here, no matter what happens." I crawled up another 5 yards and looked over the dike, and my platoon sergeant came crawling up, and he asked me what happened. I told him. He went back, and shortly the medic, Doc, came, and I told him what happened, and he looked at Stewart and Young, and I knew he was going to go, and I knew if he went, I'd have to go protect him. And he looked at me, and I said, "Doc, don't do it." And he looked back at them, and he looked at me, and I knew he was going to do it. He got up on the dike, and they knew where I was at because I had shot from there. And he rolled into the rice field, and here came all this gunfire. I didn't hear a sound. But when he rolled off the dike, I got up on the dike, and when I heard the gunfire, I stopped my forward momentum, and all this dirt came flying up along my right shoulder, just a stream of it. And I went behind the dike and shot all in through there again. And then I went crawling up another 10 yards as far as I could go to the corner. And my platoon sergeant came up alongside me, and he looked at me. We looked at each other. We were putting our clips in our pockets because they were in a bandolier across our chest. And I had a rucksack. I didn't have a helmet on anymore. I couldn't crawl with it. And I had taken off my rucksack with my rocket launcher and put 2 grenades in my pocket, and 1 in each leg pocket. And we looked at each other, and we went over the dike there into where the Viet Cong were. There was a strip of jungle that had been cleared about 4 feet across. The palm leaves grow in bunches, nipple palm, go shooting up 2 stories high or something. And I pointed towards the left because that's where they were at. We started going in that way, and there was a dike inside there. I don't know what it was doing in there, but we were behind the dike. He asked me if I had a grenade. I said, yeah, I gave him one. And he said, fire in the hole, and he threw it right in front of us. And I went around the dike and crawled into this little mud depression, and I knew they were right in front of me somewhere. The depression was about 7 feet long. There's mud in the bottom. I was holding my rifle up so it wouldn't get in the mud. And I looked up over the dike, and there's this strip of jungle that had been cleared, and several foxholes down the line. And in the first foxhole, I saw this man really looking around, straight ahead, out in the jungle, looking for someone else to shoot up. Now the gunships were coming in too, these miniguns, machine guns, and they shot rockets into the jungle. Yazir and I would duck my squad sergeant when they came over us, because we were right there. And so this first Viet Cong in the first foxhole, I saw him, and I pointed my rifle at him, and just at that moment he turned to look towards me, and as he looked at me, our eyes met for a second. We looked at each other, and I shot. And Yazir said something, I don't know what he said, but I ducked because I was expecting more automatic weapons fire from somewhere. And so I was in this mud depression, and I didn't want to bring my rifle down, so I held it up on the edge of the mud depression. It was only about a couple feet deep. So I rolled over on my right side to pull out my last hand grenade out of my leg pocket and lob it in front of me right there where they were at. And so I have my grenade in this hand. And I let go of my rifle right up on the edge. I thought I'd be okay there. And I was going to switch hands and pull the pin with my left hand and lob the grenade with my right hand. But the minute I let go of my rifle, I felt this sort of ball roll into my hand. It gently rolled into my hand. And I knew immediately what it was. And I started to turn towards it, and I never saw it. It just gently rolled away from my hand, and just as I was getting ready, probably getting close to seeing it, it exploded. And there's this big blast, and I felt myself like I was suspended. There's this hum and this silence, and it felt like I was on my knees. And I knew I was going to die. And I said, Dear God, don't make it too hard on my parents. And then I waited to die. And I saw this little red dot with this little red string, red line going round and round this little red dot. And all of a sudden I hear Yazir say, baby, are you okay? I said, just get me out of here. And for some reason they didn't shoot me. I guess they thought I was probably going to be a wasted shot. And I tried to stand up. I stood up, and fortunately I fell backwards. And Yazir grabbed me by the collar and dragged me back behind that dike he threw the grenade from. And I asked him how bad it was. I couldn't see anymore. He said, you're going to be okay. I knew it was bad. He said, you're going to be okay, baby. He said, do you have another grenade? I said, I left one in the mud hole. And now my tongue was getting really full and heavy. I guess I was losing a lot of blood, and I was so thirsty. Never been so thirsty in my life, and it felt like my tongue filled the whole of my mouth. And I heard him shoot, and I thought, oh my God, if they got him, then no one's going to know where I'm at, and I'm going to die. So he came back, and he cut my pencil and gave me a shot, a morphine shot, I guess, these little morphine shots we had with us. And I asked him again, am I going to be okay? And he said, you're going to be okay. And by then, other men in the open rice field started coming the same way we had come in. Somehow, I guess, since we had gotten right in on them and shooting down their lane of foxholes, they probably got out of their foxholes because now they were targets. So they went back into the jungle, so everyone else got out of the rice field. So here came the priest, and he gave me my last rites. And then 4 men put me on a poncho, and they went racing through the jungle back to where the helicopters had landed. Once I was falling off, they stopped, not with any care at all. They threw me back on the poncho and grabbed the 4 corners and went racing through the jungle again to where the choppers had dropped us off. Someone had called in a medevac. And so we got to the edge, and there were 2 gunships in front of the medevac coming down. And they were shooting at the gunships now, the Viet Cong, from that side as well. I guess they were all along up there. We had just come in on them unexpectedly. And so the medevac was coming in real low right behind the gunships. And they said, here it comes, get ready. And they grabbed the corners and went racing out into the rice field to throw me into the chopper. But they suddenly spun around, went racing back into the jungle, and threw me into the jungle because the chopper was getting shot at too much. And the gunships made a big swing with the medevac, and they came around, and they said, here it comes again, get ready. And they got ready, and they grabbed the poncho and racing out. And the chopper barely didn't even land. It just probably hovered for a split second, and they flung me up into it through the open doors, and they went running off, and choppers took off. And I kept talking to anybody and everybody, and the guys dragging me to the jungle because everything was getting so heavy and dark. And I thought, as long as I'm talking, I know I'm alive. And so the corpsman and the medic in the chopper stripped all my clothes off, just cut it off, and I was late, put me on a stretcher, put a splint on my right arm, and gave me a shot, and I was trying to talk to the pilots and him, asking if they had kids, where they're from, anything, just so I could talk, because it was so dark and so heavy. And then all of a sudden, we landed, and the stretcher I was on got jerked out of the chopper, and I guess it got put on a gurney, and they went racing across the helipad and in through these doors, and there are these doctors and nurses, and they were trying to get my service number and my name, and I was telling them, and then some doctor said, I'm going to give you a shot in the shoulder here. You're going to go out in a few seconds. And a day or so later, I woke up, and first voice I heard was a Vietnamese voice, and I thought, oh my God, where am I? And then I heard some other American voices, and I thought, oh, I'm in a hospital somewhere. And so I went in and out for a while until finally I came around long enough, and the doctor came and told me what all had been done. And so I was there for about a week, and there was a little Vietnamese girl who would feed me, and because both arms were tied down, I couldn't get out of bed, and she couldn't speak English, and she played this little game with me. I couldn't see, my face was all bandaged and hands were tied down, and she'd blow air on my face on my left side, and I turned my head that way, and then suddenly she would blow air on my face on my right side, and then she'd giggle, and then she'd go off to go do her work. But she'd come around and play that game every once in a while, and she, when she was ready to put something in my mouth, she'd say, up, and I opened my mouth, and she would feed me. So I was there for a couple of weeks, and I went to this 24th evacuation. That was the 24th evacuation hospital. And from there, I went to this other place for a couple of days. I don't know where that was. And then from there, I went to Japan.